Welcome, everyone. We're doing a little bit of a lunch and conversation today. It's a learning experience, but it's also just a time to check in. And we hope that if there are some new members, they might be even more serious about us. And Becky's going to learn some things about Impact 100, which I know she's excited about. We're going to record today just so that folks that are not able to join us can watch and get some information. So Maya's watching our chat room today, and she's also doing support in the background while I, Mary Lloyd, who is the education chairperson for Impact 100, kind of facilitate what goes on. But really, this is a conversation. We just feel it's just a great size and group. We're going to use some breakout rooms, though, and maybe get a couple of us going back and forth so that we can get to some content a little more quickly before we come back as a group. I think everyone's familiar with Zoom, but as we said, this is just come as you are, because we're all here. And please eat, please don't worry what your hair looks like. Just come, because we know what life is like these days as we go on into our next month of all of this. Let's see. This was August, I think, or September. I was doing some work online, and Vu Lei, which most of us are very familiar with Vu because we either read his blog, Nonprofit AF, or we knew him from RVC, the Rainier Valley Corps. Some may have worked with him as an executive director. He's just a force to be reckoned with for sure. And he left his executive director position and has started a group with some other folks called Community Centric Fundraising, CCF. And they're really trying to address so many of the issues that thankfully have come up through COVID around racism and sexism and social justice issues that sort of impact the whole realm of giving and philanthropy. And I was looking at their post. They do a little weekly rewind group, and Becky's article was in there. And we have put it in the chat room for all of you, but it's entitled, "As a White Woman, Do I Have a Responsibility to Disrupt Philanthropy?" And after reading it, I was just so delighted that she put lots of ideas that had been swirling around in my head down on paper, and was brave enough to do that. And I reached out to her on LinkedIn, and we set up a phone call, and I just so enjoyed my conversation with her. She's refreshing, she's honest. She's got this great theater background, so we could connect on all these different levels. And Maya did something very similar. Maya reached out to Becky, and then Maya and I chatted about it. And we were like, wow, she's so wonderful. We'd love to just chat with her more and bring her on, because she lends a perspective, I think, that it's as we're new in our development and as we're trying to figure out who we are and what we're up to as an organization and a group, as a collective giving group, as a space where we're trying to bring new members in and carve out our own niche in the philanthropy realm. It's just I think a really healthy conversation to be having together. So thanks everybody for taking a little time and coming. And I'm going to turn it over to Becky, because I think she is going to do a great little introduction of herself and tell us a little bit more, and then we'll get into a little bit of dynamics and conversation together.
Yes, thank you so much, Maya and Mary, for facilitating this and for welcoming me into the conversation, and for everybody who's busy, taking time out of their busy lives to show up for this hour. Awesome. It's great to share space with you. And thanks for being open to participating in this conversation. And I want to be really clear. I have zero area of expertise. I have not written a, master's thesis on race or philanthropy or any of this. My lived experience is I'm a white woman, and I'm an expert at that. And I also have I also have all the baggage of being a white woman. I have experience both as a fundraiser and also as a donor. And I've been doing both of those things for a really long time. And in my journey in the world of philanthropy, as I like to call it, I've really struggled. I've really struggled internally with a lot of feelings that I couldn't name, with a lot of discomfort that I couldn't really identify, um, and I knew that there were a lot of these norms and quote unquote best practices, but I couldn't really understand for who were they best for. So I was really questioning philanthropy, and so like I said, I wrote this essay and sort of I s- I just was spewing. I cranked that thing out in about 30 minutes and I shipped it off to the content person at CCF, and she's like, sure, let's print it. And the fascinating thing to me has been that hundreds of women, white women, have come out of, from all over saying this really resonated with me. I really identify with some of the things that you're saying. And so, my work now is to really understand what do I need to be doing to rethink the relationships between the donors and the people who are asking for the money, and also the relationships between the donors and the recipients, the people who are actually benefiting from those dollars, and how do we rethink the power dynamics in those relationships. So what does that look like? I have absolutely no idea, but I'm happy to be engaged in a conversation with other people like you to sort of brainstorm and talk about the feelings and talk about your experiences and brainstorm. And so this is a conversation where nobody should be muted, unless your child is having a temper tantrum and you just feel like you can't have it on. Otherwise, just unmute, and this is just going to be an open conversation. So I invite you to just join me. I am going to start by just for those of you who have read my article, thank you. If you haven't, no worries. I'm just going to give a little tiny snapshot of it that will sort of, I think, inform, give a little perspective. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. I went back to work at this very fancy prep school. Let me emphasize the word very fancy. I mean, by Connecticut standards, that means, there were colonial columns everywhere. I mean, it makes Yale, which is, up the street, look a little shabby. And my job there, working on a team with 11 other development people, was stewardship. And stewardship is, in the lingo of fundraising, is the process of keeping donors engaged and informed, which makes perfect sense, right? Like if somebody's giving you money, you want to make sure that they're engaged so that they give again, and they should be informed so that they know what you're doing with their money. Seems perfectly reasonable, right? Except that the reality of the way that this works in philanthropy is that stewardship is actually just ass kissing, just excessive, ridiculous, over the top ass kissing. And it was nauseating. It was exhausting. I had a portfolio of 150 donors, each who had given in excess of $100,000 each. So they're high wealth donors. And the amount of power that they wielded at this place was astonishing. So not only were they getting the buildings named after them, they were, they had the power to determine, what is the font that my name is going to be in, and what color should we paint that? And if there's a science lab, what should it look like, and what should the materials be, and what should be taught? I mean, the scope of how, how much power and leverage they had in their gift was completely out of whack. And they literally had power over the trustees and the head of school. And one of the things that was my job is that I was supposed to ensure the happiness of the donors. That's really what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to make sure that they were happy at all times. Whatever they wanted, I was to make sure they got it. If they asked me to jump, it was how high. And, a little tiny granular example of this was, Big Donor Bill had his signature cocktail that was the only thing he drank.
Mhm.
And at every single event, and there were over 50 a year, and he was at every single one, my job was to make sure that all the ingredients for his signature cocktail were on hand, and that when he arrived, I was to take his coat and then discreetly hand him his signature cocktail while everybody else was, drinking the Chardonnay, because Big Donor Bill only drinks his signature cocktail. And, it's funny, but it's also disgusting. And after 3 years, I was like, I'm out, man. This is like killing my soul. This feels so gross. And, you know, the fact that all of my relationships were based on this subservience to the donors was just demoralizing. And I thought, okay, I'm out. I'm going to go work for a refugee resettlement organization that I had already volunteered with. I was already a volunteer. I was their development chair pro bono, and I loved their mission. I was like, okay, it's really about the environment. But you know what? It not only was it the same, it was worse. And the reason is because the people who give to refugees are not only donors, but they're white saviors. So they get to be extra special. I mean, they get extra special treatment, like thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was complicit, right? I was complicit as the person doing the fundraising, writing my thank you notes. Dear Sarah, thank you so much for your contribution. Little Ahmed will have a winter coat this year because of you. You know, always thank you, Becky, right?
Yeah.
Like I was feeding this narrative to these people who were giving authentically, totally authentically, but still perpetuating this power imbalance, right? And then the real kicker is this. I got to be the white savior because I was doing the good work, right? Like I was like, I'm not going to work for the private school. I'm going to go work for refugees because I am the extra special good white person. So anyway, it's been a long journey of me sort of really working through this messy stuff of power and wealth and whiteness and women who are at the core of being helpers. That's what we're trained to do. That's what we get kudos for. So I now have names for a lot of the things that I was engaging in: poverty tourism, white saviorism. I've learned, but I want to be in more authentic relationship with this world of philanthropy. Like I want to have donors and fundraisers be in authentic relationship with each other, where I say, listen, we just need general operating funds. And the person's like, no, I'd really like to do is build a theater. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not what we need. So can you do X instead? And if you don't want to do that, then that's fine. Then go build a theater somewhere else. I want to be able to be authentic. And I also want donors to be authentic in their relationships with the recipients, the people who we call marginalized or underserved, right? So that those relationships are not, that we're careful and thoughtful about how we connect with the communities that we're partnering with. Mary?
I want to ask you something as we sort of get into this too, is that do you find with Impact 100, we're all giving, well, the expectation is, and this isn't set in stone, but we've all given $1,000 with the goal of getting 100 of us to come up with $100,000 pool. So, you know, we're not going to have a building named after us per se. Like there's this whole, like,
Yes.
but we're in the backyard of the Gates Foundation and of the McCaw Foundation and of like, Seattle is incredibly situated. I've been here over 30 years and it's been amazing, our trajectory of how philanthropy has grown. And I think, we've joined Impact as trust-based philanthropists and we're so small scale right now, but I think this is really important stuff to think about as we kind of grow into who we want to be, because I do think we're going to encounter, some of this thinking that still is, it's always operated this way. This is how it should work, and I think it's hard for us to grasp because we are doing it on such a small scale. Not that we don't know, and many of us that are members of this deal with a PTA on a regular basis, which is sometimes a really hard group to corral like cats, or, I think we can all name groups or boards or something that we've sat on where it's, I caught myself just being quiet at the end because I'm just so appalled or surprised by what someone has said. So I was just curious about the real fact of just numbers and bottom line and dollars and cents. And I don't know if anybody else feels that's on the call.
Does anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I totally see what you mean, Mary. I think to me, as Becky, as you're describing those donors, it almost makes me feel like, well, we're not in that position. So I think that we're in a way trying to do something and trying to change philanthropy where we can.
Mm-hmm.
But it almost, when you talk about the big donors, almost seems insignificant because we're not playing in those areas. So the question would be, what, if anything, we as an organization could do to maybe sort of start influencing not just, our pool, but also actually start influencing some of those bigger donors, because it just seems that if they don't change, giving is not going to change.
That is true. That is true. I think it's, I'm going to push back a little bit, Mary, on this idea that, because you're only giving $100,000, that, that there's some sort of distance between what Impact, 100 is doing, because truly $100,000 to a small nonprofit is enormous. I mean, I've worked at organizations where if we got $20,000, it would be a total game changer for us. So $100,000 may not mean much money in some situations, in some organizations, but the power that you could potentially wield if you give $100,000 to a very small organization, that's still a lot of power. I mean, yes, scale is relevant, but it's really more about the relationship between the donor and the recipient, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And I know that you are, because of your work with Voulay and that your approach to this is different. I am eager to hear about ways in which you are sort of thinking about these issues differently than sort of the traditional philanthropic norms. I know that you are trust-based.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone want to talk about like what that means and what that really looks like?
I certainly can, but I feel like
I
probably shouldn't be the only one talking.
Well, do other people, I mean, is that sort of like a norm that is that language that everybody uses within the org? I'm just trying to, I know that you are doing different things. I mean, I know you don't look like most other organizations doing the work that you're doing. And in fact, I've said for people who like, who's doing it? And I said, well, Impact 100, go see what they're doing. Because I know that that you are disrupting the norms.
Mhm.
So, I'm just sort of interested to hear where you think you are doing it, and maybe where some opportunities are, to grow
I'll
that.
speak up. I haven't said anything, and I'll speak out of turn. I think the truth is that we still have a lot of work to do within the organization itself to get everybody on the same page. Is kind of my impression, that we have these principles. I think some of us, I mean, we're holding on to them dear, right? And it's important to who we are. But I think there is a fair number of women who don't fully understand what that means, who don't also fully understand the degree of commitment with which we're going into this, that it's not short term, that it really should be leading to deeper relationships with the organization that, have received some of the grant money. My sense is right now that there's a core of women who are committed to the idea, but that the larger circle we need to bring closer into this, and I think so that I think there's actually work to be done within the organization to make sure everybody gets on the same page, because I can see some people approaching it with sort of this air of magnanimity, right? Like, I am, and I hear it's my money, and then they seem to be walking away instead of spending their time in this conversation, for instance, like, okay, well, where are you? It's not just about you giving the money and then somebody makes a decision and you get to feel good about yourself. It's actually about really engaging through the entire process, and in the end also engaging with these organizations that we funded, and I think that journey not everybody is on. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that, Manuela. Thank you. I think that's true, because we're all in our own journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spectrum, right? I mean, we're all trying to figure out how we share power,
Mm-hmm.
and how we center the voices of people who are having the lived experience, and who are our communities of color. Like, that's one of the things we're all struggling with,
Yep.
and we're all in a different place in our journey,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I think that's universal. I think, in every org, in every community, in every friend group, everybody's sort of in their own place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as, as long as there's a shared understanding that that's the objective, and people are still working towards that, I think honoring and giving grace to the people who aren't quite there yet is okay, as long as the leadership is clear on challenging, continuing to challenge yourselves to ask those hard questions. And we
Yeah.
probably should think about getting into a breakout room, because this hour is going so fast.
Yeah, and be
So,
clear about the fundamental principles on which this organization is based, right? And repeating until we're all there. Yep. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I've looked at the the website, which talks about the 3 pillars, right? Of connect, inspire, and empower. And one of the things that I would sort of challenge your organization to think about is, when you're connecting, who are you really connecting with?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the community that you're connecting to? Because oftentimes, I know when I'm giving to an organization, part of the reason that I'm giving is because it provides me access. It allows me to network. So are people joining this because that allows them the opportunity to be in community with the other women,
Mm-hmm.
the other 100 people, or are they in community with the people that are being served in Seattle? And so I think that's a question you might really want to ask. Like, when you're talking about connect, is it like, let's connect to each other, or
Mm-hmm.
let's connect facing outward?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
But does it have to be one or the other? Because I
No,
would argue
I don't
that
think it does, but I think I'm just here to play devil's advocate and ask the hard questions, about, just stir the pot a little bit. Because I know that for me, I'm just saying, for me, I know for a fact that I am motivated to give and participate for all kinds of reasons. And most of them are good. Most of them are because I really care, and I really want to make a difference, and it's important to me. But I want to own the fact that it's also because I get benefit. I get benefit when I give. And it's not only altruism, it's also, I get to feel power. I get to feel like I'm part of the club. I get to feel like I'm empowered, and I get to, there's all this other stuff. So I just encourage people when they are thinking about their giving to just own the whole of it. Just to consider that we give for all kinds of reasons, and I'm not judging that some of them are good reasons and some of them are bad, that it's just a big messy thing that we should just acknowledge.
So I have a question. I think that that's a really, really good point. And I think that one of the issues maybe, when you were talking about the rich donors in the private school, I think one of the issues is that what the school can offer to them is sort of, kissing their ass and making and naming buildings after them and all of that, which is sort of which drives the dynamic that the power imbalance, right? And so as I'm thinking about all of this, and this is still, it's forming in my mind, so I'm sorry if it's not fully formed, but it almost seems to me that what impact it does, or our organization, and I want to, I also want to just make sure that that everybody's aware that Impact 100 Global, all of the Impact 100 chapters do not work the same way. We are very different than most of them.
Absolutely.
But I think that something that Impact 100 provides is, I guess, that reward, that good feeling that is independent of the organizations, of the communities that we're trying to support. So that if we can say, well, part of that good feeling is that connecting with other women who are maybe like-minded, who can share ideas, who can help educate each other, that actually doesn't have anything to do with that power imbalance, with feeling good because you're feeling like a savior. So it's almost like, can that be part of the answer of saying, let's raise money, let's donate money, let's trust the organizations that they do the right thing with the money, because that's the whole idea, right? And let's get sort of that reward, that intrinsic reward, by connecting with each other, and not by feeling like we need to be the saviors for the community. I don't know what you guys think about that, everybody.
Well, I was thinking, when we're a work in progress, so we're really, really new. We just went through our first grant cycle, and I just think what I've appreciated is the level of self-reflection and introspection. And I never thought about the question that you posed, Becky, because to me already that's like the power imparting. Being part of this group is just kind of leaning into something, going, okay, I know there's better ways to do it, but I don't know what the answers are. And I think that, I do feel, joining this in December and then quickly having a pandemic and never been to a live event other than the conference I went to, which was this group. I do feel like, there is this 100 women. It's kind of a little bit of like, where are they? Because we just haven't had a chance to really experience the greater group. So I think we do need to keep doing more self-reflection and finding out kind of the why people are joining, and kind of drawing that back to kind of values, and making sure it's, we're all at different stages of life too. So sometimes you can kind of lean into more things than others. But yeah, I think, again, we're a work in progress.
That's really, really helpful to frame it that way. And I think that's absolutely true. You are, I think really you're groundbreaking in a lot of ways. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the evolution of the org and the work that you're doing. But yeah, philanthropy
Anna brings
yeah.
go. I think Anna brings up a good point, though, that I think there is the whole, and I was definitely one of those that joined because this was a network of women, new women for me. I have good friends in Seattle, but I was really wanting to meet some new women that were kick-ass, that were in leadership positions, that were excited about some of these things. And I think for me, involvement in the group comes obviously more naturally because I can see some of these women and see myself in them. More so, even though having been an executive director of a small nonprofit, I'm looking at other executive directors of color for the most part now running, their nonprofits under some really different circumstances. And, I know a lot of what they're going through, but I also know that I look different. And the sense of community and relationship and how that is fostered and built is different from the role that a network of 100 women who have more in common, I think, than we probably do differences. That holding those together, especially as we go forward, because I do think for some it is the giving the money away and learning about those. All of our members would love to volunteer and be involved with the organization in some way that we give to, not as much, Impact 100, but also like on the ground in our communities that we're giving to see how things are, just to learn more, just to know what the landscape even looks like. And so they are very different. And I would imagine for me, or, I'm the old dog teaching new tricks, in this world that I'm in, but and I'm giving, and I'm a helper, and I'm all those things, that I think are good. But I also know that those have always looked a certain way and have been exclusive, even though it wasn't ever my intention to make it that. And so it's lots of implicit stuff that I can't control. But I also think that there's this beauty of, we are committed people who are trying to be conscientious and curious and be good allies, and at least be like, I don't know, but I'm going to embrace where I am and my own development, and that I have a responsibility. I didn't necessarily cause this per se, but I have a responsibility to look deeper. So.
Exactly. I really appreciate that. That's where I am. And that's why I just wanted to have this conversation, just to ask these questions, not because I have any answers. It's a big nut to crack, and the world needs philanthropy. We have to have it right now. There's just too many gaps in our system. And we all have causes that we care deeply about. And I'm a fierce advocate for moving money and moving wealth into the hands of those who are furthest from the resources. There's nothing about what you're doing that's not awesome. It has to be done. It's just, just constantly keeping in the back of your mind, am I being authentic in my relationship? Am I sharing power? Am I centering the voices of the people who are doing the work? Am I honoring the expertise of others? Just checking in as an individual, and also collectively, and holding each other accountable for that.
I have a thought. This is Krista. I know I'm on video. But this is making me think about our impact, not just on the nonprofits we partner with or our members who are interested in our values, but also how are we impacting the landscape of philanthropy in Seattle. And I wonder if there is a way to advocate for diminishing these power dynamics outside of our organization. Think about what we do. We have these nonprofits get on calls and tell us, this is what we did with an unrestricted grant. This is why unrestricted grants are great. How come they're not getting more unrestricted funding? And how can we help to amplify that message for them and to other, you know, funding powers? Why aren't more people doing it? And is that something we can kind of add to our focus?
I love that. I mean, I'm not part of your group, but I love that idea. I mean, it seems like, I mean, one of my sidebars is, to disrupt community foundations, which are very steeped in all kinds of problematic things, and also do great work. But, it seems to me like there's an opportunity for you to be sort of a model for other Impact 100 orgs nationwide and internationally to really kind of disrupt and challenge that model. I mean, that's really a way to, I mean, I understand what you're saying about changing the norms in Seattle, but I would encourage you to even think bigger than that, to really say this can happen everywhere and should be happening everywhere.
And I'm sure that there are people like you and who are kind of sending that message broadly. But, as a group of women who were trying to enact it, just having it be a part of our, the work that we do. I'm even thinking, and some of our like social media platforms, just kind of addressing power dynamics in philanthropy as just a post, and where it's really easy for people to see and just to learn, just looking at a post. And anyways, this is just getting the wheels turning for me in that way.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, the thing is that most people who are in the work aren't free to talk about it. I mean, it's totally taboo. I quit my job. I quit working in philanthropy so that I could be liberated to speak about it. And I'm probably completely unhireable in my community at this point because I have called people out on this so much. And, so the idea that there's lots of people talking about this, there really aren't. There really aren't, because it's not safe to do it. Funders, people who are asking for funds can't really have these difficult conversations with donors. It puts their funding at risk to say, oh, really? Are you thinking about how you might be exploiting our poverty, in your, that those conversations can't happen. So, I think
not even accessible because you just send in an application and you never know who you're sending it to. And you might get a letter back that says, sorry, we didn't, we picked someone else, so because so many of these foundations are small family driven, the board is friends of their friends and nobody really ever sees, and they only put requests out once a year, it's a very exclusive.
Absolutely.
And I know one of the things we bump into is, we're a volunteer organization too. So there is like inherent in the fact that we're all giving on that whole other level. And as women not getting paid for all the work that we do, whether it's in our homes or in our living rooms kind of thing, but because we care. And,
we didn't ever
but I like what Beth has to say too. I that strand of sort of, and if we have women as influencers or that group that's really capable, that could be an area for us to have a more impact,
So interesting though, because I feel, I mean, I think that everybody has sort of mentioned this. We are just so new and green and I mean, frankly, uneducated, right? So it's really interesting. I think that Becky, you said that, well, you don't know anything. But clearly you've spent all these years in philanthropy, so you have this lived experience of, this is what I saw, I didn't like it, so I'm going to try to change it. It almost, I love the idea of trying to influence others. I have to say that it almost makes me feel like, oh gosh, but how do we really even know that we're doing anything right? And it's hard to influence others when you're just still trying to sort of figure out exactly what you're doing.
Well, I mean, I think that having difficult conversations is the way you figure it out. I mean, that's what I'm doing. There's no playbook for this. There is no playbook for a new way of thinking about philanthropy, because philanthropy is historically very steeped in power and white supremacy, and there's a whole history of philanthropy that's rooted in racism that I would strongly encourage you to go to listen to the Ethical Rainmaker podcast. And here there's a great one about the racial roots of philanthropy, racist roots of philanthropy, and it gives the whole history of how it started and how it's become women's work, right? That the women are the people who have taken up the space in the world of philanthropy. We're the executive directors, we're the fundraisers, we're the movers and shakers. It's also because there was a power gap, right? Because men were all out earning a living, and at the turn of the century, women were not, but they wanted to have their own power, and so they turned to charity to do that. And so there's all this stuff jumbled up with women capturing their power, right? I mean, that's and it's sort of like trickled down into the PTA, where women are jockeying to be the president, and there's a lot of stuff to unpack with power and the word of charity and doing good works and philanthropy, and it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what, my sense is, and I've thought about this before, but my sense is, given what you've just said, that maybe we really need to rethink our use of the word philanthropy. Is that really what we as an organization should be into? Can we rename it to something that is more appropriate to our intention, which is really recreating a sense of equality, as far as I'm concerned,
I appreciate that. I use the word philanthropy in air quotes all the time, because philanthropy implies a transaction.
And this difference, right? Already this differential built in,
Right. I am the giver and you are the receiver. And so one of the ways that, we're trying to disrupt this is by talking about it as change, partners in change. It's a partnership. That's what it is. It's not philanthropy.
Yep.
And it's really not about
my words.
I'm sorry, what?
So I put my video on because I
Thank
wanted
you.
to make my contribution. And I think that my contribution is, I see it as the distance between the giver and the recipient. And closing that gap is an important issue to me. And when you relate to the people that you give to send the message that this is a partnership, and it is indeed a search for a better solution or a better way to exist. And I think that one of the routes to that is to do what Impact 100 is doing, which is looking to the margins, looking to where the power-centered givers didn't give, and shining the light there, and building from these small grassroots organizations, to really learn the essence of what people need, where they need it, and how to grow into giving into that. Because when you close that gap, the whole power issue sort of becomes a non-entity, and the process becomes more about equity. This is our fight. Our fight is towards achieving equity. And so it sort of pushes power out the door altogether, because the gap has narrowed. So I'm going to go back behind my video screen after having my say.
Thank you.
But it is what gives me passion, and to just narrow that gap and also to redefine how impact is measured in a sense. Not using words that are transactional or that become one-liners in a website that demonstrates that you've done something. But just redefining what impact really means. So I'm hiding again.
Absolutely. I really appreciate those comments. Yes, impact. What is it? It's that's a whole other conversation for another day. As I said, I feel like $20,000 could be incredibly impactful in a certain community, and have but those are all questions for you.
Yeah, and we do have, we've, at least those of us that have been involved on the leadership team and of really trying to make some parameters around, giving to organizations with $2 million or less as a budget, giving them opportunities to take money over a 1 to 3 year period. I mean, there's definitely some things, making sure that maybe unlike a food bank, we're really going for organizations that are really trying to to tackle issues and not just treat sort of symptoms of something else. So I think we've definitely had those kinds of conversations, and I know I continue to go back to the collective giving circle. Like I don't even feel like philanthropy comes out of my mouth very often with this group, because I feel like we're so dynamic, and although there's still that word giving in there, I do feel our partners are in tandem with us. It's at least we're offering room and space and time to cultivate that.
And I think the beauty of it is I gave it some thought over the summer and never really finished it. But, in the Pacific Northwest, we're deeply rooted in a tradition of giving circles, and I think something that we could maybe explore a little bit deeper, that there's a tradition of the potlatch, the communal giving, which I think is maybe much more akin to what we're trying to do than, a model of philanthropic giving. So yeah, I think, Becky, I do really appreciate it, because I feel that, we've had these discussions early on, around like, who are we, what are we trying to do, and how do we move forward? And I feel that over the last year, by force, we've gotten much more process oriented, like how are we running this and how are we running that? And it's really good to go back to those really basic topics, I find, to say, what are we doing? How do we know that we're doing the right thing, and reorient ourselves a little bit to say, is the model right? How can we improve on it? Because I think we're so kind of now, almost a little bit siloed already, that it's good to have a conversation like this. So thank you. Thanks for Maya and Mary for initiating this.
And I'm just glad to share Becky with all of you, because I feel like I had a whole hour of her to myself, and it was just so inspirational. And then Mary and I had 1 or 2 more conversations with her. So yeah, I'm just glad that everybody feels the same way that we did. And I mean, I think, Manuela, what you just said about philanthropy as well, to me has been like just a great aha moment of it's just become such a almost like it's so just automatic that you think, oh, this is philanthropy, where I think we should sort of like revisit what is it that we're actually doing, and should we almost like remove ourselves a little bit from that, because when people hear that, immediately what you think is the power dynamics. It's just the giving, the rich giving to the poor, it's and that's not what we are about. So I do think there are some things that we should look at again, and just keep those conversations going.
So Becky, I have a question for you. I'm assuming you've probably spoken to many people in your journey on this journey, right? Is somebody doing it right? Do you feel like there are models or people, or what is the sort of gold standard, or not? Probably there isn't a gold standard, but what are the silver little linings that we can look at, that we can learn from?
There are none.
No, don't say that.
No, I'm serious. I mean, I mean, really, I'm not bullshitting you. I'm in the process of writing an article because, you know, community-centric foundation, I mean, community-centric fundraising, there's 2,000 people on our Slack channel, right? 2,000 people. People are constantly saying, does anybody have a model? Does anybody have any examples of where this is really working? Can somebody share some data? Can somebody give us an idea of a process that really worked for you? And I'm in the process of writing an article where I think my next essay might be, wake up, white people. There's no handbook. There's no checklist. There's nothing. You know, this is the way it's been for 200 years. And we're all so deeply entrenched in it that we're going to have to just smash it up and make something new. And the only way we can do it is to just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And when we make a mistake, we say, oh, great, that was horrible. And next time we're going to fail better. We're going to do it better because we tried this and it sucked. And we're going to tell all our friends that don't do that because that didn't work. And we're going to rebuild this thing. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's really kind of where I'm at now. After talking to hundreds of people and being on this Slack channel with 2,000 other people who would think all day about this, just like I do. And they're all waiting for the handbook.
Mhm.
And I just keep saying, there isn't one. We got to build it. We just have to build it. So go do the work, try it, be bold, like you're out there, you're being bold, you're asking hard questions, you're thinking big thoughts, and you're going to make mistakes, and give yourself grace. And then when something works, you know, cheer about it and share it and inspire other people. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but that's what I can tell
What
you.
are some of the channels that you're finding that are good for sharing and either inspiring or being inspired?
Well, you know, so for me, it's been the community-centric fundraising piece has been really critical for me because, you know, that's the lens that I'm looking to disrupt from. You know, I follow Chuck Collins. I think Maya already added his him into the chat. So he runs are you familiar with Chuck Collins? He writes, yeah. So he's he runs a program on inequality, and he's the one who's been calling for emergency charitable stimulus in Congress. He's, you know, they're sort of a think tank around philanthropy and redistribution of wealth. And he has a weekly newsletter. So I sign up for his weekly newsletter, and I find that sometimes is a really helpful thing to just spark conversations with other people. What do you think about this? How might that work? You know, Fleur Larson has been a great resource for me in my journey and understanding what it is for me to be a white woman and how I think of myself as an ally and some of the obstacles that that I wasn't even aware I had. And Mary just did a workshop with Fleur as well, and it's powerful. She does a workshop that's called Power With, Not Power Over, and it's pretty intense and pretty inspiring. And, you know, if you haven't already read Winners Take All, be sure to read that, the elite charade of changing the world. And have you all read Decolonizing Wealth? Yes, good for you. And so, you know, I don't know if you shared those with that reading list with, and these resources with everybody who's already in Impact. You know, you're also Pacific Northwesterners. So it means you're already like ahead of the game. I'm over here in Connecticut with the land of, you know, the Ivy League colonial tower. It's a whole thing. I'm telling you, it's a whole thing over here. So you guys are miles ahead. I'm waiting for you to figure it out, and then you'll tell me. So I want to be mindful of the time. It's 4 o'clock, and I'm sure you all have lives and things to do. I don't have a hard stop. But if you need to go, please drop out. And I just want to thank everybody. You're such an awesome group, and appreciate everybody's comments. And I'm sorry we didn't get time to do breakouts and have a real conversation and all that, but
It's great. Thank you, Becky. It's been really grounding for me. So thank you so much for taking the time. It's been
of
great
course,
talking to you.
and people should feel free to, connect to me on LinkedIn or wherever you can find me. And if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, a brainstorm or whatever, totally always open for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
This is great.
Can I ask one more question? Do you have 2 more minutes for one more
I
question?
literally have no hard stop.
Okay.
I'll just keep drinking my coffee. Go ahead.
So I mean, I've been on a couple of the podcasts from the community-centric fundraising, and I do think that they're doing amazing work. And I had before we started this group, I had a conversation with Boulay, where he basically told me, what not to do. So,
Right.
but I guess my question is, so it seems to me that community-centric fundraising, the group seems to be made up of a lot of fundraisers. So a lot of the people on the side that is asking for money. Is there an effort to try to get people from the other side? Because I feel like, I think that we all know what is the evil in it, but then how can we fix that without changing the minds of the people who have the money?
Right. So there is, if you join the Slack channel, there is actually a channel for funders.
Okay.
I think that there's the risk of people, particularly white people, who might want to take advantage of that situation. There's a certain subset of people who are using the Slack channel for networking, instead of really problem solving or seeking out opportunities or building their brand. There's a fair amount of that thing going on, which is fine. But that's not what I'm there to do. Like, I really want to solve problems. But so, I don't even think you have to out yourself as a person affiliated with Impact 100. I think just go there and be there, and because there's tons of conversations happening, and be a fly on the wall and hear what people are saying and what people are thinking about. I mean, one of the things that I'm have a little project that's percolating with a partner, and it's really about foundations and the funders, helping them streamline their process to make it accessible for everybody, and to do that across the community foundation network nationwide. Seems like a very lofty goal, but why not? So I am doing work connecting with other foundations to just sort of gather exploratory research on what kinds of what would you be open to? What are the confines that you could agree to if there was sort of a common way for people to submit a request for funding.
Have you, I think that there is something like that I want to say I was talking to somebody from Denver. It was probably Sandy. Oh gosh. So I don't necessarily know if this was the right conversation that I was having, but I think I was talking to Sandy Cook, who is I think one of the chair people from Philanos. And I want to say that she talked about some sort of basically like a common application.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In Colorado. So I don't know if you've already done this research, but if not, it might be something interesting to just look into.
Yeah, thank you. I will investigate. Yeah, that's exactly what I think is needed, is just to streamline this process, within communities, within cities, within states, across sectors. If you're doing healthcare, if you're doing youth, it's just it's just so cumbersome, and it really leaves so many people out of the process who don't have the bandwidth, who don't have the resources, who don't have English as a first language, who, who don't have access to a computer. It just goes on and on and on. And I'm sure you have those same challenges, right? I mean, I would presume that there are people who aren't able to apply even just as basic as your process is. Is it just a phone call? Is it just an intake phone call?
No, we have a short application. So last year it was, I want to say 3 or 5 questions.
I do know that is one strategy that some orgs are doing, is that you can do, instead of, for people who don't have access to a computer to fill it out, or don't have English as a first language, there is a way to make a direct phone call and someone can input the data for you, or you can make a direct phone call and ask for a translator, and then you can make an arrangement to have somebody fill out the form for them in their native language. So those are two small suggestions, but that does, impact access. And also, how do you publicize it? Like, how do you let people know about the opportunity? I'm interested to know about that.
Oh gosh.
I think last year was probably a lot of word of mouth, just because, we just started. And I think even now we're still trying to figure out all of our, what outlets or what resources we use.
We talked to, I think that one of the places where we got a lot of sort of word of mouth from was RVC. This is Bulay's old.
Right.
I spoke to their ED. I think there's a couple of other similar organizations that individual members reached out to.
Right. So this is the other hazard, is that the people who are at the front of the line are the people who are closest to the people making decisions, right?
Yeah.
So trying to think about ways to disrupt that, to level the playing field, is also a really big question, right? And I don't really know how to do that. I mean, I know that I spoke with a woman named Heather Infantry, who's in Atlanta, and she did a disruptive thing where she organized all of the arts orgs in Atlanta to take on the foundation, who gave $0 to arts orgs that were Black led. 0 in Atlanta. So she organized everybody. And she said in the process of organizing all of these arts orgs, she found hundreds of organizations that she'd never even heard of. And she's lived in Atlanta her whole life. So, there has to be ways of, and particularly the smaller and more niche, and really in some ways, the more impactful they are, where they're really doing something very granular right in their neighborhood, that's, feeding kids, or, something really basic needs, just is not even on the radar of people who are giving out grants. And so, how, strategies around outreach and connecting and finding these people and places and orgs is a big challenge.
Yep.
That I have no answers for, but I know that that's a big issue.
Well, and I know I was a group of theater people that I worked with. We were a consortium of 4 different theaters that came together to seek funding for a middle school literacy project to do together. And so then that grant actually came out, to 4 different spots. So that notion of a consortium being a way to get, but I also think, it is our people, it is our partners right now who are the ones who can really recommend the other organizations. And yet it is also not having them think about it as competition, where if they nominate them, they're taking themselves out of the, potential place. But it's tricky that way. I'm
wondering if you've given any thought to doing a sort of a geographic concept, to sort of investing in a neighborhood, or investing in a or in a region, or you know what I'm saying, so that it's not, so that the people in that community will know best who's doing the work in that community, and they can help distribute to, you know, the broader pool. That might be one way of you know, sort of jumping past the finding the people, you know, just targeting an area or a neighborhood or a, you know, something like that.
Has one of you might know this, has Edgar Villanueva's group Capital, what is it, Liberated Capital, do you know if his, does that have a neighborhood or is it just a variety of different nonprofits? Because he's one of those, if you come up with a lot of money, you're supposed to give it to him,
right?
The Liberated Capital, which then is supposed to get it out. And I don't know if we gave, let's just say we gave $100,000 and said we want it to go to, I don't know if you're just sort of perpetuating the same philanthropic cycle of saying Impact 100 is giving this, and now we want you, Liberated Capital, to give it to, like, that just seems a little odd, but I could see.
It seems a little crazy, but you know what? It's actually a really interesting idea, right? Like, if the idea is you really want to just give it to the people, just give it to the community without any, you know, without needing to get anything back. Like, it's truly just like, just take it, do it. You know, not needing to like have power over the decision making and have power over, you know, the process. If it's really just a totally trust-based philanthropy, it's kind of radical, but interesting, right? Like, you guys say, okay, yeah, we got the $1,000 number, we're just going to give it to Edgar and say, go have at it, and trust that he's going to do something good with it. I think that the biggest grant they've sent out is 40,000.
Okay.
I think. So, I mean, $100,000 would be a lot to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's that big yet.
Well, he's also a pull that we could then, I would see us being able to invite other donors or funders in for a really organizing, manipulative conversation around, okay, for some of those bigger folks, why aren't you giving unrestricted funds? Like, why does so much continue to sit inside your, you know, your pool? Why are you, because even within that 5% they give, you know, that's also for all the administrative, it's for all the people in the office they're paying those positions to administer that. It doesn't even all just go to the communities. I'm like, that's your operating funds too? Like, that's just crazy to me, you know? So
don't even let me get started there.
That's just the bottom line stuff that just makes me furious.
You know what would be really interesting? I'm sorry, my mind is racing now. What would be really interesting is for Impact 100 to do a match, to pledge to give $100,000 and match, you know, and use that as matching funds for other organizations who are willing to, you know, so that you can generate, so that you can double your impact. Like, pick an org or something and say, yeah, we're not just going to give you $100,000. We're going to give you $100,000 to use as a match. And, you know, the way matches work is it's a match, but it's not a match. You're just going to give the money, but it gives them leverage to build a campaign, to say, we're going to, you know, and, or
placing even more, like, is that giving them more work to do? And is that, you know what I mean? Like, is that telling the organization, well, you can, like, it's tying strings to the money now?
No, because what really happens when you say that is, you, for example, I would say, listen, Impact 100, I'm going to give you $10,000. I'm just giving it to you. But if you want to use it as a match to motivate others, I'm giving you my consent to do that. That's
okay.
Yeah.
That's really
and then you and I have an unspoken agreement that if they don't meet the goal, I'm still giving you my gift. Yeah. You know, but it allows you to sort of, you know, build momentum and build enthusiasm. It's like, wow, we just got this, you know, and it, you know, I mean, I know that the idea is to give $100,000 because that's a lot and that is what is impactful. But, in some ways, like 5 orgs, $20,000 each as a match, so that then they can have $40,000 from their own community. I don't know, just an idea.
Well, and I think about Dom at Community Passageways. They're trying to do a big campaign for a new youth center. He intervenes to try to be that last space before youth are incarcerated, to really work with them. And he got a grant from us this last year, and now he's gonna, but even for him to kick off, he was like, we're starting a capital campaign and I really have no idea what I'm doing here. So if anybody has any ideas, I'm happy to, just knowing that seed money is there. Cause I know in my preschool, we used a match as a way to just be like, hey, TCS was just given a $10,000 match. So it was one more reason for our parents or our stakeholders to say, oh, this is a good time to give, because now my 100 is going to be 200. And, it was, I agree with you.